Hello, I'm Rick Hertless, founder of His Gospel Power. Thank you for joining with our program as we look into the book of Daniel chapter 5. Please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button, and thank you to all of those who do support our ministry through their prayers and financial gifts. So we are in the book of Daniel, and we're in chapter 5. We're looking at this point, we're looking at both the integrity of Daniel and the majesty and the power and the faithfulness of God. And we're in one verse, one fell swoop. Daniel has already said that in two verses. First, Belshazzar, the king's son, the King Nebuchadnezzar's son, who is now king, offered him all of this money if he can interpret the dream. Daniel says, interpret the writing on the wall. Daniel says, hey, keep all your money. I'm going to tell you anyway what it says. But then that's very next verse in 18, he says, O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom of majesty, glory, and honor. So in other words, all of this was because of God. Okay, the most high God did this. So he's given the faithfulness and the power of God and the integrity of Daniel in just a couple of verses here. We're on verse 19 now. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. Whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen. His body was wet with dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men and appoints it over whomever he chooses. So he's giving a very brief synopsis of Nebuchadnezzar's life, letting him know, look, God set him up, but then he took him down for a time until Nebuchadnezzar recognized where his power came from. Unfortunately, as we discussed last week, it seems like Nebuchadnezzar is like most Christians. They recognize where the power of God comes from during his blessings, and then they turn away whenever any kind of whenever the blessings are happening. Then they turn away from God until everything gets real bad again. And then they got to turn back to God to get him out of the mess. And so that's pretty much the American Christian for sure. Maybe it's a worldwide thing, but all I can speak to is America. I live here. And so I see what happens on a daily basis where people, they get blessed of God, and then they get all complacent, and then they go back to the way they used to live, and they forget all about God. Well, that's what Nebuchadnezzar was doing. Unfortunately for Belshazzar, and we'll get into this probably tomorrow. I don't know if we'll get to this part of it today or not, but Belshazzar never has honored God. He never would. He didn't know God at all to turn to him, which of course is also an indictment of his father, who never really explained to Belshazzar where it all came from. He didn't really honor God enough to pass it to his family. Ron.
I think you made a good point about America and the story of this, and we can look just into our recent history. If we discussed this, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, about the Shemitah cycle that God established. Well, 6 years of work and a year of recovery, but yet it's also God's reset plan that if a nation is basically disobedient, he will reset that nation to give them the opportunity to come back to him. And we saw that here in America since 2001. Basically 2001, with the bombing of the World Trade Center, was an American financial reset. Well, America didn't learn. He hit us again in 2008. And then if we look at it, 2015 was basically the start of another one. But man in his infinite wisdom, and I say that sarcastically, has been able to postpone it through more of their corrupt means. And when I think about that, I think about how many people in churches and, and I will say Christians also, because I've seen them, they haven't learned from those last 3 cycles that we've gone through. They took the hurt during those years, but then they fell right back into the same cycles that created the problem in the first place.
Which, of course, I guess that's kind of human nature anyway.
It is. And that's why I'm just...
And that's why, hopefully, what's going to happen with you, the listener, and hopefully what happens with me, even though, look, I'm fallible human man also. Hopefully what's happening with me, though, is the recognition, as your maturity grows in Christ, the recognition of God grows longer and longer and longer and longer. So you're not so quick to forget. You understand what I'm saying?
Right. And then really that's what happened with me. I had never heard of the biblical concept of the Shemitah until it was really after 2008 that Jonathan Cahn brought it out in his book, and I read his book, and he pointed out that cycle is how God works. And so, in my life, those didn't really affect me because I wasn't a victim of those false financial issues at the time. But in my life, and I'm sure many others, even though we weren't a part of it and suffered as a result, we still recognized it to prepare us to make sure we didn't get into it or that we prepared for the next one that's coming. So, did God allow those cycles to happen to make those of us that weren't in it, but to still stay aware of it, and that those that were in it, to wake them up so that they don't go back into it? It could be as simple as that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like I said, even those that it wakes up for a time forget. In some ways, it's almost like the woman, the woman having a baby. She forgets about the pain. They say that if men had babies, then we wouldn't be having a population explosion because we're probably not going to forget that pain. We don't want to do it again. The women, but that's because of the love, and all of that kind of thing that comes. The women soon forget the pain they had to go through childbirth. I think maybe it's the same with even the financial things where you go through for 7 years, you lose everything. You get all complacent again. Next thing you know, you're back into financial struggle again. I mean, that happens. That's a pretty common cycle.
Yeah. And if you don't learn from those down cycles on how to prevent it the next time, like in this case, obviously Belshazzar didn't learn from his dad, whether his dad told him. I mean, I find it hard to believe that he didn't at least hear the story.
Yeah, he must have maybe even seen his dad in the field or something. There's bound to have been some kind of talk about Nebuchadnezzar eating grass in the field.
Yeah, when a king, which is the ruler of the known world at the time, gets dethroned for a time, lives with the animals and eats grass, right, and then gets put back in power.
There's got to be
There's got to be that story passed down. I mean, it couldn't have been that long.
Right, exactly. I mean, it couldn't be. How could you keep a secret like that? So, especially within the family. All right, could you keep it a secret in the kingdom? Yes.
Well, look at the story of Joseph. A new king came to power that was from outside that nation,
and they forgot all about it.
Yeah, and that could have been a simple.
Well, the king would. That was the Pharaoh's son.
Well, he was actually from a different kingdom when they took over. So he didn't know the story of Joseph.
Well, he didn't know about the Jews and all those things.
Right.
And so all of those things were repeated because he had no prior knowledge to that. And so it's possible, I guess, that Belshazzar had never heard the story.
That's hard to believe though, but
because Belshazzar was in the picture.
Right.
It seems like he was in the picture throughout, but we don't know that for sure. What we do know is Belshazzar has utter disdain for everything except himself. He doesn't hold the gods in high esteem any more than he held the one true God in high esteem. Because he didn't seem to be a godly person, whether you're talking about little g or big G.
And it could have been as simple as Nebuchadnezzar, like we saw. Every time he was enlightened about the power of God, he still turned against it.
Yeah.
It could have been
but that's
that,
what I'm saying. It's almost like it's a human characteristic, I guess, is that you forget. You do these things and then you forget. You go through the struggle and then you get delivered from that struggle and everything gets going on an even keel and then you forget.
Yeah, so it could have been as simple as Nebuchadnezzar basically was in that phase in his life when Belshazzar came of age and he was back in that, I'm God and no others matter. So
Right. So one way or the other, Belshazzar does not have any respect for God whatsoever.
Yeah.
And the only respect that he's got here is for his own life, which is to save his own life. Somebody, he's trembling. Remember, we were talking about last week, when he saw the hand come in and do the writing on the wall, his knees were knocking together. In fact, it says that his hips gave way. Basically, he almost fainted. His knees were knocking together. His hips gave way. He almost fainted.
Well, yeah, because he thought he was the supreme power in the land, and then here's something that just basically defied that instantly. Which,
of course, so did Nebuchadnezzar. Especially in the beginning of the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, you could say he thought he was pretty supreme himself.
Yeah, but still the dreams scared him.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he saw those dreams and he's like, I need to know something.
Yeah.
Belshazzar, though, as far as that goes, we have to give the same thing to Belshazzar. He saw the writing on the wall. He said, this is not good. I need to know what that means.
Yeah.
What was the language? We don't know what the writing was. Maybe it was in Hebrew. We don't know what the actual writing was. It was something nobody could read, which would make sense if it was in Hebrew, because the astrologers and everything would not know that language. We don't know what it really was. Was it a heavenly language? Was it angelic? We don't know. So, that's another issue that's not even pertinent, really. It's writing that nobody could understand except for Daniel. And so we are looking at Daniel chapter 5, and he says that in 5:22. See, we get into here. But you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although this answers our question right here. Although you knew all this. You see, you read this, if you continue to read the scripture, it'll pretty well give you the answer.
Yeah.
So he knew about all of this. Like you said, there was not something that he could keep a secret. I mean, you got the king out there eating grass. And more than that, you have a son, seeing his father do that. Now, like I said, you could have held this from the rest of the kingdom, but inside the household, you're not going to hide this. And so Belshazzar, he sees the fact of all these things. Actually, he was probably privy to all of the things. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, being thrown in the fire. I mean, that's something. What an event. You would have to have heard about 3 guys that got thrown into fire and did not even get smoke smell. How could you not have heard that? That is so miraculous that had to be told. So he knows about all the miraculousness of God, but yet he still is arrogant little, I'm going to say he was an arrogant little punk. He was just the guy that had everything given to him. It was all, he had a silver spoon in his mouth. He inherits the kingdom and he's not ready to be king. He has no wisdom whatsoever.
I think we know a few of those actors and actresses in Hollywood.
Well, yeah, but unfortunately, they have no wisdom to pass down to their children. So, and that's why
right.
It's explained why their children have no wisdom. So, verse 23, and you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of, this is the crux of it right here. It's not so much using those earthly vessels to drink from. It's the fact he knew what he was doing.
Yes.
Because he said, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know, and the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways you have not glorified. So he used all of those things and really shook his fist at God. Remember when we were studying the book of Revelation in the tribulation times? We're going to see that again. Really, you know what we see? Do we not see that right now? I see that with Congress. In fact, I was in disbelief. I don't know why I was in disbelief, but I was in disbelief. I was watching a video with Nadler.
I'm sorry.
And with Nadler, and they were doing a testimony from someone, and they said, do you swear by this? And the person said yes. And one of the other congressmen, a Republican congressman, said, we forgot to say we swear by God, Mr. Nadler. And he said, well, no, we didn't forget that. We don't need to do that. If he wishes to do that, he can, but we don't need to do that. That's not something that's part of us any longer. They are now shaking their fist at God and saying we don't need. Now, if you want to split hairs as a Christian, the Word does say that you should swear by nothing. Don't swear by heaven or anything. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. But that's not the reason. They're not doing that to honor God, to honor His Word. They're doing it, shaking their fist at God, saying we don't need you any longer. That's what's going on. That's what we're seeing in the House of Representatives. That's what we're seeing in our government, in many of our government officials that are shaking their fist at God, saying we no longer need you. We're going to do whatever we want to do, and you can't do anything about it. That is what is going on in our government today, and I believe they're going to pay for that. I believe they're going to pay dearly. I was listening to a prophet just last night, as a matter of fact, and I believe many of them are going to pay dearly this year. Forget about the election. Many, I think, may pay with their life. Well, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining with our program. We'll just probably discuss this a little bit more tomorrow, and if not, you know that it will come back around eventually, because that's just what we do here on His Gospel Power. Thank you for joining with our program. Please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button, and thank you to all of those who do support our ministry through your prayers and your financial gifts. Until next time, I pray you receive His Gospel Power today.
He died for you. He died for me. From our sin, He set us free. He loved us so, His life He gave. So if we ask, we can be saved. He's calling you, He's calling you. Jesus Christ is calling you. If He's touched your heart and soul, then come let Jesus make you whole. Come kneel with me and we will pray that all your sin be washed away.